All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Brett to Be podcast. My guest this week is the legendary Hans Ray, the one and only. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Tippie, for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. Now, you're like a hero to many mountain bikers, a hero of mine. And, you've been a pro mountain biker longer than pretty much anyone, and you're still doing it. And, basically, when you started mountain biking, and being a pro, the Dead Sea was just sick. It's been a long time.
Yeah, I had a pretty good run, I guess. It's been knocking at, I think, 35 years soon as a pro rider. So I'm pretty stoked.
Now, do you have the longest running sponsorship of any mountain biker or any athlete? Is there anyone who has a longer running sponsorship than you do with GT?
No. I think nobody in mountain biking. Tinker and Ned are close, but they are shorter at their sponsors than I have been. And the only person I've heard who had a longer record is Steve Caballero. He's been with Powell Peralta for 40 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the skateboarder. So, I think I would have never dreamt that I'm doing this stuff at my age still professionally. I mean, I always thought when it first started, a couple more years and then, get a real job. So,
and you're still doing it. You're still going for it.
One of these days.
Yeah. Well, you know what they say? Growing old is mandatory. Growing up is optional.
Yeah, there we go.
So you were born in 1966, born in the 60s. Sorry, I shouldn't tell anybody, like a fine wine. Your father, Felix, was Swiss. Your mother was German. How do you say her last name? Your mother's first name? Siglinde?
Yeah, Siglinde, or we called her Siggy.
Siggy. And but you took a Swiss passport. I think you've been living in the States for a long time, but you've had a Swiss passport. And you're literally from the 60s. I'm from the 60s too. So I'm from 69, but born in 69. You were born in 66.
You look like a 69 kind of guy.
Yeah, pretty much. If 6 was 9. Better than a 68, no you one. Yeah. Brian Lopes just sent me a question for you and said, why didn't you celebrate your 70th birthday?
I started already.
Yeah. You're early to the party. Awesome. So your first bike. Tell us about your first bike. Let's start at the beginning about this amazing career you've had. You've been a competitor. You've made movies. You've done so much like TV stuff and like web stuff. Like you're always recreating yourself and working so professionally. But where did it start? What was your first bike and how did you start riding a bike?
You know what? I didn't get my first bike until I was 8. So I had a pretty late start. And it was just a regular bike with fenders and I used to ride to school on it. And then we had one of those bicycle rodeos in my hometown. And those safety rodeos.
Rodeo.
And me and my cousin and I did it, and it was organized by our local motorcycle trials club. And from then on we wanted to have a trials motorcycle. But our parents thought, you guys are too young, that's too expensive, that's too dangerous. So we kind of started imitating the motorcycle trials guys on our bicycles. And before we knew it, we had 50 kids in my hometown. This was in 78. And we were not the first to do bicycle trials. There had already been competitions in different countries and places, and people were doing it, but it was not big by any means. And most guys had homemade bikes. Like I converted a Stingray, and we put smaller gears on, and we put 3-speed hubs in there and so on. And then eventually, like a few years later, the first BMX bike started to trickle over to Europe. And then we started converting BMX bikes, even though I never raced BMX, but we used the bike, we put a smaller chainring on, we made the handlebars wider, we changed the hubs, we put a 3-speed hub in the back, and we put a drum brake hub in the front. And then a few years later, there was the first small productions from various companies of trials bicycles, all 20-inch stuff at the time. Mountain biking didn't really exist yet at that point.
So 26 wasn't a thing. It was all the 20-inch.
It was all 20-inch, and it was all connected to the motorcycle trial scene, not biking scene. Like in America, trials was always together with mountain biking, but over there it was kind of seen to be the first step before you switch to motorcycle trials. And some guys did it very successfully, but that came from bicycle trials, like Jody Tares. But some guys, like me, we never switched over, and because the sport started to take off, and we started to compete in European championships, and we used to go to Spain and England and have some competitions, and we started doing trial shows early on. But it was basically a teenager sport, and when I was about 18, I remember I retired officially and figured it's time now to go to university. And little did I know that my career hadn't really started yet.
So your mother would not let you ride a moto because you were too young, so you stuck to the trials bicycle, which were 20 inches, like you say. And then that was in 78. In 79, you did your first competition and got second. And did that turn your crank? Obviously the competition, because you were good at it and you enjoyed it. And then, like in 1980, you went to your first event out of town. I read in your notes, and that was the unofficial German Championships. And from then, you started a trials show team, like you say, and started traveling around with Andy Kromer and Oli Schaffler, was it?
Yeah, you know those guys. You met them before.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So were you getting paid at this point to do these shows with your trial show team?
No, like it was a complete amateur sport. I mean, yes, I was like one of the best in Europe during those days. And even if you were one of the best, you maybe got a free bike a year out of the deal. And then we would earn a little bit of pocket money doing trial shows at the local car dealership or at some city festival or so. And Andy and Ollie were two of my good friends who we started out together. And we had the show team. And Andy Kromer, he still rides professionally to this day. He's now more like he has a mountain bike school, and he does photo shoots, and he's still in the business. So all these years later.
Longevity from you guys. That's amazing. So 82, you went to your first official German championships. And from then on, you won the overall for the next 4 years in Germany. Who was some of your rivals back in the day? Like I read here that like you say, Jordi Torres, who went on to become 7-time world champion in moto trials. He was one of your main rivals, eh?
Yeah, we were friends and rivals, and it was a small scene. And Ott P is a guy that some of you might have heard of, and he was just coming to age then at the late 80s, where he was in my age class. Or where he would ride in the top class. Before that he was quite a few years younger.
Yeah.
But he ended up being a big rival for me, especially like towards the mid and late 80s. And in those years there was this American guy coming over to compete in the European big races, and he was sponsored by like Kuwahara and like all fancy, like he had like all this shiny kit and uniforms, and he even told us he was making a salary, which none of us did. And he wasn't even in the top 30. But one of those years he told me, Hans, there's a new sport in America. It's called mountain biking. And in mountain biking in America, trials is always part of it. And you should come over and show them what real trials riding is. And at the time, I was always reading the BMX magazines, BMX Action and stuff, and had an eye on those magazines, which even though I never raced BMX, but I would read the magazines, and I saw those kids in there like R.L. Osborne and Eddie Fiola and
Buff.
Craig Hill, Mike Buff, and making 6-figure salaries, driving Porsches, and it was just like a different world we couldn't even comprehend. And I was like thinking to myself, wow, that would be cool to get to go to America before I retire and get to see that country and maybe meet some of those BMX heroes of mine. And
did you speak English yet?
So yeah, yeah, not really. I mean, I spoke a little bit, but it was even worse than now. So, we always, we had English in school and we spoke English traveling in Europe, but I wasn't that fluent yet. And so I contacted my school. I had just started studying at the university, and I asked them if I could take a semester off right away. And they granted me a semester off, like a vacation semester. And I went to America, and Kevin introduced me to everything and everybody. And it really changed my life because he really wanted trials to start to pick up in America and get big. So he was like introducing me not only to all these riders and competitions, but he would go to different bike companies and say and tell them, you should sponsor this guy, trials going to be the next big thing, and we need like more trials guys. And he would introduce me to the Laguna Rats, which is this legendary old mountain biking club. And these guys, I still ride with them every Wednesday. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go riding with them in a couple hours, And the Rats made me to be a real mountain biker. There was some really iconic riders from this club, and it was a really cool culture. And so I was kind of thrown right into it, and I literally got to meet within the first 2 weeks all my BMX heroes, because I was invited to a couple BMX film shoots where literally everybody was on set. Like they had these shoots, and then I also got a phone call from Swatch watches one day, and they said, we need 2 trials guys to come to New York City this afternoon, pack your bags, tickets at the airport. And we went there, and I did this famous photo shoot where I jumped over a taxi cab in New York City. And out of that started the beginning of a 19-year-long partnership with Swatch. They started sponsoring me. They became my clothing sponsor. And Swatch were really they paved the way for Red Bull. They were the cool company that did sponsor all the cool extreme adventure sports or extreme sports way before anybody else did. And they put on cool competitions, and to be part of Swatch was a huge thing back then. And it gave me the confidence to make that I maybe stay a little bit longer in America.
Yeah, things are working out over here. Yeah, good call. Now, before you came, though, didn't you have to do some mandatory military Swiss Army service?
Jawohl, sir.
And you were like a machine gun shooter?
Yeah, I was a mitrailleur. That's the machine gun division. I have some photos somewhere in this house. But military in Europe is obligatory. But in Switzerland, they couldn't really force me because I was a so-called foreign Swiss. Because I didn't live in Switzerland. I lived in Germany all my life. Okay. But I still did it because in those days, you were frowned upon if you didn't do the military service. And it still was important in the culture that everybody should do it. And it also shows that you have management skills or if you have a ranking in the military. So I just did the basic training. It was only 4 months, and it was actually a really cool experience. And as a matter of fact, the Swiss Army is not professional. So everybody kind of just comes in for several weeks each year. And my mayor in the army was the marketing boss at Swatch. So that was a previous connection I had. And his boss in the army later became the coach of the Swiss national road cycling team. So there was they had an understanding, and they would let me train, I had my trials bike in the gun deposit where all the guns and munition was stored. I had my trials bike, and twice a week they gave me an hour and a half off to go practice. So so that was the early days.
That's so cool, and such a small little world, eh? Bike people everywhere. Were you a good shot with the machine gun? Did you blow some stuff up?
Yeah. Watch out! I'll get you. I won a few awards.
Yeah. Well, you won a few things. So at this point, you had won 4 German championships. You'd won 3 Swiss championships, and then when you came to the States, you won a USA championship before they changed the rules to only have American competitors in the championship. So you'd had, some top results, and then you were consistently top 5 in the world at that point. So you were well on your way before you really even broke through and got that New York ad and whatnot, eh?
Yeah, and it's it was a cool time then, and shit, I completely forgot what the question was.
No real question. No, so you're a competitor, and you got that ad with for Swatch. And
Yeah.
You said that your real big breakthrough that put you out there was a TV show that was a batch or something. You had to ride like a balance beam, a square of balance beams, and it had 41 million viewers on TV and whatnot, and that kind of really blasted you out to the world with 41 million viewers.
Yeah,
and that was kind of your breakthrough, or one of your big breakthroughs.
Well, it was interesting because it was literally like a few weeks before I first came to America. And this was the biggest TV game show in Europe. And at the time, there was only 3 stations. And this show was so popular, literally everybody watched. And I mean, you don't get these numbers anymore these days. Like 41 million viewers live on one go. I mean, that's insane. Like, that's amazing. So everybody was watching, and the show, celebrities were in the show, and they made a bet that so-and-so could do something crazy. So somebody bet that this guy can ride his bicycle along 4 balance beams that were put to a square. You know, those gymnastic balance beams?
Yeah.
And nobody
could imagine... So like that wide?
Yeah, exactly, 4 inches. And nobody could imagine how a bike would get around the corner. You know, like when you couldn't ride it, but I was hopping around the corners. And I was really nervous and stuff, but I ended up winning my bet. And I was really got quite famous in Germany because of that, but I didn't cash in on my newfound fame. I packed my bag, some really, really short shorts, and I flew to America. And that's when, you know, I did my first stint over here, and Kevin introduced me to everybody. And also early on, he introduced me to GT. And GT was at the time the BMX powerhouse. And a lot of people thought, and this was before the mountain bike boom. In 97, the mountain bike boom hadn't started yet. It hadn't exploded, you know. It was growing,
87.
But it hadn't exploded. And a lot of people... Yeah, 87. And a lot of people were thinking at the time, well, maybe after BMX and skateboarding, maybe 20-inch trials could be the next big thing. And that was one of the reasons they sponsored me. The other reason was GT was just starting to get serious with their mountain bike line. And they had hired a new manager, and he came up with the triple triangle design. And we hired a couple other racers like Rishi Graywall for cross country and Toby Henderson. And shortly after, 20-inch bikes died, and BMX took a big slump, and mountain biking took off. And I was part of that whole wave. And so GT sponsored me, and at the same time, Swatch had sent me all over the country to do trial shows at shopping malls. And I would do them usually together with like skateboarders like Rodney Mullen, and even Rob Roscoe. I did a bunch of shows with him.
The owner of Santa Cruz Bicycles.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a pro skateboarder, and we traveled to Malta and other places and did shows. And you know, I was traveling around. Mountain biking hadn't taken off.
But you're getting paid by now. To hit all these shopping malls, you must have been getting paid.
Yeah, I made money and made a living, and I moved in. My roommate was Josh White. He was one of the best vert BMX freestyle riders at the time. He was on Team GT, and I was kind of had a lot of connections to the BMX world, but also the mountain bike world and the rats. And I would do shows, and I would still travel also to Europe to do some of the bigger trials competitions there. And yeah, so that's kind of how it all started out. And then it was kind of, you know, nobody ever had a job like this to make a living. Nobody had heard of this. I was supposed to be at university, or I was supposed to do an apprenticeship somewhere. And I got a lot of pressure from home, you know, my family and people were like, what are you going to do in 2-3 years when this is all over and you don't have an education? And there was a certain pressure on, and I knew as longer I would stay in America, as smaller were the chances that I could ever go back and finish my studying and stuff. So, and there came a point before mountain biking took off that I was wondering about getting back home, and then another new sport I kind of got to rub elbows with was inline skating. And if you believe it or not, I almost became a professional inline skater.
A rollerblader.
a rollerblader. The whole aggressive inline skating scene started in the very house I was living in. My roommates were involved, and we had a mini ramp, and I was already getting paid by Rollerblade to test brakes and wheels, and one of my roommates, he was also a BMX freestyle at the time from England, and he changed over, and he then had a 15-year career in the rollerblade industry as first a skater, and then later a magazine publisher and a photographer and so on. But so in those days came probably the biggest turning point of my career, and that was when one day Richard Long, and he was the late president of GT Bicycles and co-owner together with Gary Turner, he came to me and said, "Hans, it's so difficult to explain to people what you can do on your bike. Why don't we do one of those videos?" And that was when I did the first video called Hans No Way Ray, and there was nothing like this out there. The only videos that existed was cross-country race videos. They were so boring to watch that, you know, and like with elevator music, and we did this 15-minute video with me jumping up urban stuff and really steep mountain bike trails and really stupid one-liners I would say into the camera that people would repeat to this day. And it was just a milestone. The people were eating up those videos. Like, I mean, this was 92. And then in 93, I did another one of my videos called Level Vibes. But I also was involved with the first ever feature film, was called Tread. And Tread was a feature-length mountain bike film. And Greg Herbold and myself were kind of the Beavis and Butthead. We were like kind of the anchors throughout the film. But the cool thing was that this was kind of the endless summer for mountain bikers, this film. But the cool thing was everybody was involved. It didn't just have one bicycle brand as a sponsor. Every big bike brand sponsored a different segment, and all the top riders had a little segment in it. And everybody was kind of in this film. And when it came out, they did big like screenings, like, you know, like with audiences and all that. And it was also, that was a big movie. So there was all these kind of things started to evolve, and mountain biking really started taking off in those days in the early 90s. And that was really the beginning, or the almost, you know, that was the golden era that they always refer to.
Yeah. Well, so you're making movies and stuff. You know, I know that you won first place at the Mountain Bike World Championships in Durango, but were you still competing as you're going into 91, 92, 93? When you're making these movies too, were you still doing the competition and doing the free riding thing too?
Yeah, I mean, first I started out as a 20-inch trials guy. Then I started adding the stock bike trials, which is the 26-inch, the mountain bike, and did trials on that. And that was all of a sudden people appreciated my skills even more because they could relate to it. They all had a mountain bike and they knew how hard it was just to bunny hop it, you know. Mm-hmm. So when they saw me jump over cars and all that, they were like, and then I started also doing some downhill races and dual slalom races. And then came the phase right around the same time, or maybe a little bit earlier in the very early 90s. I used to watch those extreme skiers, Glenn Blake and Scott Schmidt, were jumping off cliffs and doing all this rad stuff. And I would say, man, I don't want to be a mountain bike racer. I want to become an extreme mountain biker. And this was like 4 or 5 years before the word freeride was coined. But so I started calling myself an extreme mountain biker and started using my trial skills out in the environment and in different situations. And you know, initially we would just ride down really steep trails and yes, do some trials antiques on the bike, but we didn't have full suspension bikes yet. And you know, we just like rode everything that was steep. And then it wasn't until when you guys came along and full suspension bikes had introduced that you guys really made the big bang. And all of a sudden there was a word for it, and there was bike brands were aware of this whole new trend. And you know, like and the stuff you started guys doing, the big drops and stuff, was like something that nobody had seen. But until then, we kind of you know, did our thing and kind of yeah, just like started something.
So some would say, or you could say that you were one of the first free riders. You were making movies and riding off trail and having fun doing it. So like you're literally one of the very first free riders.
Yeah, I mean, some people say that
If
I'm
not
the
the first
original,
free rider. Well, there's
the
been
original.
a lot of people
Well,
free riding, but
yeah, but no, it's definitely, and even my influence with the Laguna Rats, because like in the late 80s, everything in mountain biking became about racing. And it was about Lycra and stopwatches and training and performance. And the Laguna Rats it's one of the oldest mountain bike clubs in the world. I mean, they started like a couple of years after the Marin County guys started. And but they always kept that real spirit of mountain biking. They would like ride in t-shirts and like shorts, and they would like hike and bike and go bushwhacking and drink beers and ride the steepest trails they could find, and they, like I said, they kind of even kind of in the chronological order of Freeride, they had a part of it. And there was literally a time, Tippie, you're gonna laugh, when I was so cocky, I would say or think at least to myself that I ride anything that anybody in the world rides on a mountain bike, like in terms of gnarliness or steepness.
yeah.
And trust me, I stopped a long time ago saying that or thinking that. but it was like this. And then you guys start coming along and Bender, and they started doing, and some of those early stunts were pretty risky that you kind of where I was like looking like, oh my God, this guy got so lucky pulling this off. And then I started saying, anything that anybody can do twice, I can do. and then I used to turn that camera on again, sorry. But then pretty soon, I mean, the sport evolved so rapidly, and nowadays, I mean, look at it. You can go to any town in the world, and there's a kid that can do tricks that I can never do. But that's how it started out. It was such a small community as free riders,
Yeah. Well,
and we pushed each other to new levels.
So things are getting crazier, and you're riding pretty much whatever you can and what anyone will ride. But you took a good setback in '93. You had a big crash in Albany racing a downhill, and you broke ribs, punctured a lung. What happened there?
Well, it was a big crash. It was one of the first big crashes we experienced in the whole mountain biking world at the time, and I. At those days, I was kind of half-heartedly racing downhill, and the downhill courses weren't that gnarly. Often there was fire road sections and pedaling sections, and even you would drink from your water bottle doing a race run. But I would be very busy with those trial shows and stuff, and I would sometimes come in very last minute to an event, and without training runs, I would enter the competition and race. And this was, I think it was a Grundig World Cup, and I really entered without a training run. I think I rode once down in the morning, and on the fire road there was a big dip, a water bar. And in the morning when I just rolled down the course to check it out, I didn't go full speed. And when I came race speed, it buckled me. I should have just pre-jumped it, but I didn't realize it would buckle me. And I went into this nose wheelie at 45 miles per hour. And I ended up in the hospital, breaking. I was unconscious. I was a week in the hospital. I punctured a lung, broke many ribs, and everybody was really concerned in the mountain bike community. It was a big thing, and it kind of made me realize that maybe I need to slow down a bit. Maybe I need to go back to my roots a bit again, like to the trials riding, and stick with what I'm best at, instead of I wasn't a bad downhiller, but I was never like the top 10 guy, so. And I would still race some downhills after that, and some slaloms, and I got even third place in the dual slalom in '93 in the World Championships. But I would like remind myself, hey, I'm a trials guy, and let's stick with that. And it's but it wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy street to take, because, and even those early extreme biking things I was planning on, because nobody had seen it and knew about it, and they weren't believing in it. They didn't think it had a future. For my team manager, it was all about cross-country racing. And then second was downhill. And then third we do some dual slaloms. And then there was the trials guys.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I was like on the right track with my videos, with my riding outside of the competition zones, and then along came that Zaskar, the GT Zaskar, which was the ultimate bike for that era that could do it all and literally won a World Cup in every discipline. It's the only bike model that ever won a World Cup in cross country, downhill, slalom, and trials.
Wow.
And I was kind of the poster child of that bike, like in that poster back here, you can see.
Do you still have one?
Oh yeah, I have a few. I mean, those are cult bikes, and people collect them all over the world. And I was just reading a draft of a book about the late owner of GT, Richard Long. There's a book coming out at the end of this year, and it is a really cool book going down memory lane. But it made me realize how big of an impact I had on so many riders who ended up buying these bikes and also starting to mountain bike. And it was all inspired by non-racing activities. And at one point, eventually mountain biking came to the point where they go like, you know what? We have sold millions and millions of bikes, but how come Norba only has 30,000 racing licenses sold, you know? And they started to realize, well, a lot of people who have a mountain bike are not necessarily interested in racing. And then like this, you know, like when you guys came with your contribution and with your Freeride movement, the time was there for a lifestyle and something else than stopwatches. And that's why I, even in the early days when I watched the Freeride scene explode, I was even against competitions. I was like thinking, you know what? We don't need to force everything into a competition, or especially timed stuff. It's like, let's just let it unfold. And by the way, I think the same way about the e-bike movement. Everybody is now trying to cramp the e-bikes into the same format. I mean, it's the dumbest idea I've ever heard, the e-bike cross-country race. You know, so why not let the e-bike find its own identity, you know, and so people do with them what they're meant for, having fun and making things easier. Racing a cross-country e-bike race is the hardest thing Julian Absalon has ever done in his life. So it's like...
Well, they're pushing right past the end of the motor anyways, right? They're just like...
You have to. Your heart rate is fucking out of the roof.
Yeah.
It's against the whole concept of e-bikes.
They're past the power of the motor.
It's supposed to be easier and fun.
Yeah. Oh, crazy. So you're with the Good Times movement, but you still, actually, after you broke your ribs, you still won the World Championships in trials at MetaBF, France. Is that, how do you say that? MetaBF? So you still were like top of the game. Yeah. So you still won a World Championships, but you wanted a free ride, and you were doing it. So you were juggling some competition, winning, you know, and riding. So making money and being a professional, you were doing it, and then you actually bought a house in Laguna in '93, and it got sponsored by Adidas. So things were rolling on both sides of the scale and rolling. So then you were getting creative. Then you did some stuff like you did Tread, I think it was in '94 with Greg Herbold, which was your first 16 millimeter film, I believe. Going for the super high quality.
Yep.
And then then you made a movie that people remember, Monkey See, Monkey Do, which was like a how-to video with a chimpanzee, Mr. Jiggs, I believe it was. And
Mr. Jiggs, that's right.
Yeah. So tell me about that experience.
Well, at the time, mountain biking was really exploding, and people started to wanted to learn those tricks I was doing. They wanted to learn how to bunny hop or ride a wheelie or do whatever we were doing. And I thought maybe I should do a how-to video, but I want to not just do an educational video. I want to make it entertaining too. And at the time I was thinking, I knew that the comedian Robin Williams was into biking, and I knew somebody who knew him, And I thought it would be so cool to get him to be in my movie. And we actually asked him, but he was at the height of his career and his movie contracts didn't allow him to do any dangerous activities. So he couldn't join. And then somebody told me about this chimpanzee who can ride a bike. And I was like, perfect. So we got him in there and he was kind of my student and he could actually ride a bike. We made him a little Zaskar, 20-inch Zaskar mountain bike.
Oh my God.
And I got him some Adidas shoes and a jersey. And we went to his house and he was just like a little kid. I mean, he had his own bedroom. He used to know, he knew how to go to the toilet. After the shoot, we would sit on the kitchen table and eat chili con carne. And he would stand up, walk to the fridge, open the door, get out a can of Sprite, open it, and drink it there. And it was classic. And so, yeah, that video was definitely a milestone. And I just started a new how-to series on my YouTube channel. And a lot of people say, well, we used to watch your monkey see, monkey do video hundreds of times. And I learned how to wheelie and whatever not, because of that video. So it's nice to kind of get that kind of feedback. And at the time, people were really starving. That you have to understand, until this era we talk to right now, there has been no internet. There has been none of this stuff has happened. Not even X Games were just starting to come out in that same year in '95.
Yep.
The first X Games that had mountain biking and trials.
And you got second there.
But,
it's in the first X Games.
Yeah. And that was a big thing because at the time, skateboarding and BMX were really hurting and mountain biking was booming.
Yeah.
And so they made mountain biking part of it, but they said we need to have short format stuff. We cannot have a downhill race because we don't have always the long big mountains. So they decided to have slalom, giant slalom, which was basically a longer, and they had a trials competition. And the funny thing is, or the sad thing is, our federation at the time, they really screwed this opportunity up to make mountain biking mainstream. Because they were acting all like cocky and no, they were difficult. No, it has to be like this and that. And we have all our own sponsors and we're not wearing your bibs and we don't want this. And no, we don't want to be in a stadium. And even though trials would have been perfect for like an X game format in a stadium or so. So then we ended up having the first X Games in Newport, Rhode Island, and 2.5 hours away we had the mountain bike competitions on a Tuesday and Wednesday with no spectators in Mount Snow in Vermont. And yes, it was televised, but it was just like weird. And the next year they said, you know what, these bikers, they all like difficult and they all want the mountains, so let's just put them into the Winter X Games if they really want their mountains, And then they did that for a few years, but that wasn't real mountain biking racing on snow either. No. So it kind of went away again, unfortunately. But it was a cool experience and a really cool stories actually. And it helped me really to get a lot of notoriety or getting known in America. Was the same year the first X Games happened. There was a strike on Major League Baseball and hockey. And the NHL was not playing and ESPN did not know what to put on TV. And they had to fill all this empty space because there was no games. And they filled it with like leading up to the X Games, they had a few riders they would like focus on and to make them familiar with their audience. Like in skateboarding, they had Tony Hawk, and in biking, they had Matt Hoffman and Dave Mirra, and then for the trials part, they picked me, and they would play my specials and interviews, and even my videos would play on ESPN all the time. And it was kind of a really cool thing. And it also started making these sports like BMX and skateboard and the characters of these sports familiar with the audience. So when the X Games came, the audience had already known, oh, that's that Tony Hawk guy who could do a 720 at the time or whatever,
Yeah.
And so anyway, so that was the X Games chapter.
95. And the same year you did that TV show as a stuntman, Pacific Blue. So you were doing stunts, and there was like cops on bikes, and that was on mainstream TV as well. So you were like all over the place.
Yeah, living near Hollywood, I would get the occasional call for some stunt work or for commercials. And they called us up about Pacific Blue, and it was basically the Santa Monica Bike Police. It was basically Baywatch on bikes.
Yeah.
Except they were wearing a few more clothes in our show. But and initially we all thought it was pretty corny and cheesy, and the scripts were pretty corny and cheesy. But you know what? This show aired in over 100 countries, and to this day, and I meet people on a regular basis who tell me they started mountain biking because of Pacific Blue. And I did that for over a season as a stunt guy, like at least 13 different episodes. We did all the stunts. Sometimes, I would dress up like a cop and double a cop or a bad guy on a bike.
Yeah.
And then I was so busy at the time that I kind of stepped away from it. And I didn't like the fact that they started using those track Y bikes, and I didn't want to, I was known as Hans Ray in GT, even though I had a wig on and looked like a woman with fake boobs, like doubling a woman cop. It was still like people knew by my tricks that it was me.
Yeah.
And I had other stuff to do, so I kind of stepped away from it. But then they gave me a part in the show where I got to play myself as Hans Ray. I was the evil Eastern European bike coach for the cops, and there was like 2 episodes, and I had quite a few speaking parts, and it was kind of something I was pretty proud of, and it was pretty big, like I said, this TV show aired and still airs in some countries nowadays, so
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Baywatch on bicycles. And speaking of bikinis, in the same year you were interviewed in Sports Illustrated magazine in the swimsuit edition. Is that true?
Yeah, I did have an interview. There was so many mainstream things. Print media was big, not just for bike magazines, but we had literally articles in Penthouse magazine and Playboy magazine, and I was in the swimsuit edition on the last page in interview. You were in airline magazines, and sometimes I think I had a photo once in Time magazine. It was crazy back then, and and it was, this generation now, they all know who Danny MacAskill is, and he's this YouTube sensation who had this huge breakthrough. But it was basically his career and mine are very similar, and what was YouTube for him was VHS for me, and it really created this
the hype then, and the recognition and the
5
the
minutes
exposure.
of fame.
Yeah, I think you've had longer than 5 minutes. Now, speaking of big numbers, a year later in 1996 was the Atlanta Olympic Games, and you did a show in the closing ceremonies, I think with Tony Hawk and Matt Hoffman, and that had 3 billion viewers. So there's some big exposure there, and that's putting the sport out to the eyeballs as well. Tell us about doing the Olympic Games ceremonies.
Yeah, take that, you social media hounds.
Yeah. That's pretty viral. 3 billion viewers.
Well, that's what they say. Who knows?
Yeah.
It's one of those things. The opening ceremonies, the closing ceremonies, they are watched all over the world. And we did an extreme sport act, and that was the first Olympics that had mountain bike cross-country racing in it. And it was they felt like it was the beginning of a new era where some of these alternative sports would now shift into Olympic. And the guy who choreographed we had like 8-minute routine. He was Kenny Ortega. He did the High School Musical shows, and he was like the choreographer of Michael Jackson and all these people, and He knew everybody in the music industry. And he put this act together, and we had it was 20 of us. There was skateboarders like Caballero and Andy McDonald's and Tony and Matt Hoffman and Mira and Dennis McCoy and you name it, the who's of who. There were some inline skaters, and then we had about 4 trials guys, and we all did this choreographed thing with some trampoline guys on the side going off, and yeah, we got some airtime and stuff, but it was just a really awesome experience being there, to rehearse this thing for a week with all these guys. And the funny thing is I have hardly any photos. That was before we had cell phones or even photo cameras. And then later, after our act, it was kind of halfway through the ceremony, I stayed in the stadium after our show. I didn't exit, and I just sat there in the audience, and it was kind of cool to be part of this whole closing ceremony and sitting in that stadium. And they had that minute of silence. I will never forget. You know, they had like a bomb going off, and a couple of people died, and they had a minute of silence. And you were in a stadium with like 90,000 people, and you could hear a needle drop. You know, it was neat. And then all these celebrities came and played on. You know, there was big music acts that would go on after us and stuff. And at the end, they brought in all of us extreme sport athletes with the current athletes and merged us. And it was so cool to have guys with gold medals around their neck come up to you and go like, "Oh my God, I have your video and I love what you do." And it was kind of, it was cool to rub elbows that way.
I love that. That's so cool. Wow. So moving on, let's move up to 1998. You started the Hans Ray Adventure Team. And, I started doing, more and more trips and videos and projects. And you've always had a knack of getting exposure. Like, obviously when I get sent to do like some announcing somewhere, I'll try and do a photo shoot on either end, and you try and pack as much as you can into a trip to maximize your time away from home and to get exposure for your sponsors and whatnot. And you've been an expert at that. So you actually started the official Hans Ray Adventure Team. And I think that you were one of the first mountain bikers to actually have your own website. So this is 98. This is all still quite early. So right on the cusp of it and trying new things. And then in 99, you did the No Way Transalp Adventure. So you got the adventure team going, you got the Transalp Adventure, and then you got inducted into the Mountain Bike Hall of Fame. So things are rocking and rolling 98, 99 as well. Like your career just kept ramping up.
Yeah, I thought it was time to, I was kind of retired from competing, and then I had done my whole videos in the early mid 90s, and then you guys started doing all these DVD with pretty crazy stuff, and at that point I felt like it was time for the next step for me. I wanted to move on to TV, and a lot of these adventure trips, we had a camera team along, and we would make a documentary film for TV. And it would be playing on channels like Outdoor Life, but sometimes even on NBC Sports or channels. And often these TV shows would be distributed in the whole world. And I was thinking it would be a great value for GT to branch out outside of just racing. We had this huge racing team. And I remember telling my team manager at the time, look, I don't want to leave GT. I just want to leave Team GT. I'm still going to ride a GT, but maybe I can team up with a clothing company or something and do these adventures and get mainstream exposure and also introduce a whole new audience to mountain biking. And that's when I came up with these kind of ideas for cool adventures. They always had a twist. It wasn't just riding somewhere. It was like on a mission of something historical or mysterious, or in the foot tracks of Moses, or looking for aliens, or an alien dwarf tribe in China. Seriously, but that's a long story. And so a few years before that, the Transalp boom had started in Europe, and it's still a very popular thing to cross the Alps on a mountain bike. Usually people go from north to south. Usually takes like the average route takes 5 or 6 days. And there's many different routes, you can take. And I was designing together with Uli Stunt the No Way Transalp, which had basically, I think 40% of the trails were trails that were considered until then unrideable or were super steep and technical and exposed. And we just did our own version of a Transalp, and that was that adventure you referred to. And that was the time when slowly digital media started moving in. And I remember there wasn't many guys, if any, who had a website in mountain biking, and I built myself a website. And in those years I really focused, like I said, on TV exposure, and a lot of these adventures came on TV. And one last thing, like you mentioned, we're always looking out for our sponsors. And that was another thing, is like, if you won the world championships in any category, I mean, there's a lot of categories, you know, you might get in a magazine feature a half a page picture afterwards, you know, and after you even won. But like if I do an adventure trip, I have 8 or 10 pages of just me and maybe the other guy I went with and exposure for the sponsors. Or maybe a half-hour expedition in Borneo on TV. That's like a half hour on airtime of me in front of the camera and my sponsors' products and stuff. And I thought it really produced not only guaranteed value, but really valuable value to the sponsors.
Yeah, solid value.
And that was kind of the idea. Plus, I love to travel and I love to go to these different cultures. And often I would go to places that nobody had been there before on a mountain bike. Or like I said earlier, or I would ride trails that were considered unrideable. And basically using my trial skills to ride these really technical trails, like the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu is one of those examples.
Yeah, amazing. So we're moving up to 2000, and this is like you'd just been inducted into the Mountain Bike Hall of Fame. You know, you and I had met and ridden. You were actually the first person to come and reach out to the Freeriders on our first European trip in 98, 97, 98, where we show up the Riva de Garda outdoor festival, the biggest European outdoor festival, and you came to the Rocky booth and said, "Hey, how's it going? I'm Hans, and pleased to meet you guys. Welcome. Do you guys want to go for a ride?" And we're all like, "Hans, Ray, oh, of course, that'd be awesome." So we all went for a shred together, and you were very friendly, very very welcoming, and I will never forget that. That was really cool. Made us feel cool.
I remember that day too, and I had heard at that point. I had heard about you guys for 2 or 3 years. I mean, you guys really started taking the freeride scene by storm, and you were featured in a lot of ads with the Freeride, that whole story between the freeride, Rocky Mountain freeriders and the Freeriders, and I had seen the videos and stuff, and I was like, I got to start meeting this new generation of kids here, and yeah, when I saw you guys, I was like, let's go ride, and I was like, we all didn't know what to expect, but I think we all were on the same page and just having fun on some steep and technical trails.
Yep, totally. It's so greasy in Riva de Garda too. I remember it was like the rock there, like it was so slippery, and
very rocky. I don't know rocky. how it ever became such famous for mountain biking, because the trails are not really mountain bike friendly there.
They're like hiking trails that you can ride your bike down some of it.
You have to be a hardcore rider to really enjoy it there, you know, or you would just like do what the people do and stay on the fire roads and just get the
yeah, not us.
Get the elevation, yeah.
Yeah, it's like loose rock on top of solid rock. There's no dirt there. It's just rock, and big vertical too, actually.
Yeah.
But I'll remember that, and that was very cool. So we became friends, and then in 2000, there was a event called the NIA Awards, and can I tell this story? Do you care? I don't mind. I gotta tell this story.
Of course.
And so the NIA Awards was like the Academy Awards for extreme sports, and they had every action sport represented there, from BMX and skiing and windsurfing and mountain biking and everything. Every single sport was there, and they had like the best video parts and the best athlete from this sport, and you and I were both presenters, and we're in the back room getting ready, and you were like, "Hey, Tippie, I need a joke," and I was like, "Oh, okay." Well, I go, obviously you have to mention.
Well, I wore that. Remember the suit I was wearing?
Yes.
I was like all sparkling, like a disco ball,
like a chrome
sparkling, like a yeah.
And it was like one of those suits that Sean Palmer used to wear on the podium when he'd win. It was like that, but more sparkly. So Hans was wearing this chrome jacket, chrome pants, and I'm like, well, obviously you have to mention the outfit. And you're like, yeah, okay, but what do I say? How to make a joke out of this? And I'm like, well, get your co-presenter to set you up and say, "Hey, Hans, what's with the outfit?" And then I said, you should say, "Oh, it's my solar-powered cock enlargement device." And then raise your leg up like this. And just be like, have your leg up, you know? And you're like, okay, perfect. And so when you got out there, The co-announcer was like,
It sounded really funny when you say it, and the way you present it, you can make everybody laugh.
Yeah.
When I said it, silence in the room.
No one
Not
understood
one person
you.
was laughing at my joke.
yeah, you said it with such a thick Swiss accent that she set you up, and you're like, oh, it's my solar powered cock enlargement device. But you said it in such a thick accent that no one understood, and everyone's like, what did he say? And it was just, you could hear the needle drop. And you're standing there with your leg up.
I know, it was...
You got your leg up underneath. And then eventually your leg just kind of lowered. And the only one that was laughing was me and Tarek. And you're like, well, anyways, the winner for blah, 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 Oh my God, I laughed so hard. But that was a crazy event. And
Dennis Rodman was there.
Dennis Rodman was a guest speaker, and
we were partying with him afterwards.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy.
Yeah.
I was on stage with Missy Giovi, and we gave the best BMXer award to Matt Hoffman. And I forget who you were presenting, but anyone of any sport was all in like the same room. It was like walking into a magazine of the day with every single extreme sport there was. I've never seen anything quite like it since, But
yeah, it's like being at the Oscars, and everybody was dressed up and came in limos, and it was we need events like this. Like in our sport, this doesn't exist anymore. I mean,
not like that.
In cycling in the 90s for road racing and more like cross country mountain biking stuff, they used to have the Corbell's Night of Champions, where Phil Liggett would announce it and host it, and people would have a dinner. It was a black tie event. And it was something special, and there was an award attached to it, an award ceremony. But I don't know, our sport doesn't really go that direction.
Yeah, well, I've never seen an event like that before or since. It was amazing. I got to meet all my heroes from every different sport, and I wish we had more stuff like that. And getting all dressed up and stuff was cool. All right, so moving on, into the 2000s, you've got your niche. You're kind of over the competition part.
Does that mean we still have 20 years to talk about if we all
we'll hammer dude, you've got a long career, man.
Oh man.
So you've done videos and traveled all these places like Borneo in 2000, Brazil, Egypt, Japan in 2001, Cuba, Slovenia, did the Rubicon Trail with Lopes in 2002, Mount Kenya with Richie Slay in 2004, 2005, actually we'll stop here, you started the Wheels for Life.
70 countries, and then the IBA got invented, and now we're here.
Yeah,
Bang.
boom.
Finish. Over.
Yeah.
No, just kidding.
So traveling all over the world, and you did the Ireland pub-to-pub tour with Steve Pete, which got a lot of traction. I remember in Ireland.
Yeah, see that picture there, riding on the cliff?
Yeah, right on the...
Yeah, when I rode on those crazy... The cliffs, the cliffs of Moher.
Yeah, how far would you have dropped? How far was it to the ocean?
600-foot drop.
600 feet, yeah. And you're like that far away. Yeah.
You're breaking off. Say that again?
So you were riding in Ireland on the pub-to-pub crawl with Steve Pete, and then you were riding on the edge of those 600-foot cliffs, like this far from the edge, and quite aggressive. And then those photos were famous. And so, you're traveling all around, doing all these things.
Those are my...
Am I breaking up?
No, I was going to say those are probably... Yeah, you are breaking up. But I was going to say those pictures in Ireland are probably my most famous photos I've ever taken in my whole career. They really made the rounds all over the internet at that point, and in the magazines and in the news. Literally, there was a day we got all these phone calls, and in Ireland, a newspaper had put it on the front page. And the next day, these photos ended up on the front page of every Irish newspaper, and it was like big headline news. And these photos just went viral. And if I would be really curious to know how many impressions these photos made. I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, crazy. Well, I saw them and I was like, he's kind of nuts.
That was a good trip.
Yeah.
And we were hungover.
Well, you're hanging out with Steve Pete, so in Ireland, of course you are.
Yeah,
Pete can party. Steve Pete can party. That's for sure. That's
well. The mission of the trip was the mission of the trip was to do 30 pubs in 6 days, and we had to drink at every pub.
Oh my God.
So we were like all day long looking for pubs. So and literally it was a pub to pub tour, and in between we do some riding, and we were hurting that morning when we rode those cliffs. So
that's even more nuts.
Yeah, knock on wood. Don't try that at home.
Yeah, exactly, kids. Don't try this at home. So you're doing all these crazy cool trips. You know, you did Nepal with Wade Simmons and Richie Slay, and then I remember you did Kilimanjaro with Richie, like I mentioned there, and then you did a crazy adventure in Scotland with Danny MacAskill and Steve Pete again, and then you just kept on hammering out the crazy adventures. Like you did 5 volcanoes in 5 days in Ecuador. You know, the next year you did Haiti, and Norway. The next year, Corsica, France, Argentina, traveling around the world, stamping the passport. You know, 2015, you did Hut to Hut in Guatemala with Tom Euler. Yeah, I think you say his name, Euler. Sick rider.
Yeah, Tom Euler.
Yeah, he's amazing. Yeah. I love his videos. He's badass.
Yeah, he's a good rider.
Oh my God.
He's a trials guy too.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, he's sick.
Yeah.
But what was the trip that you did with Danny MacAskill where you went to high elevation and he got sick, didn't he? I believe the first day, and then he came in and got healthy, and then made it to the summit with you. But what was that trip?
Well, we went to Africa to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, and then we decided we should really acclimate before we do this trip. And then we said, why don't we climb Mount Kenya, the second highest mountain of Africa, first? And I had climbed Mount Kenya with Richie like 12 years prior. And it was a really hard trip. And so then we decided, let's do, because we weren't the first to do Kilimanjaro. There had been like a dozen people up there on bikes before us. And for a long time, it was not allowed to bring bikes on that mountain because it was a national park. And they changed those rules. And we thought it would be cool to say that we are the first to do both mountains back to back. And so we went straight to Mount Kenya, and then he got altitude sick on the second day, and it got really bad, and you can die, you know, and it got gnarly, and we had to call the rescue helicopter, and they had to take him off the mountain. And at that point, I didn't think I would ever see him again on that trip, you know, like I thought he's going to fly back, you know, but he recovered quite quickly. And so he didn't join us when we summited Kenya, but then we went down, and literally we had one day to transfer over to Tanzania to do the other mountain. And he felt good enough to join us again, and we did it all together, and he got stronger by the day. And that was definitely one of the hardest trips I've ever done. And also the most remarkable. I wanted to climb Kilimanjaro probably 20 years ago, and I tried to do it. And at the time we weren't allowed to do it, and we didn't get permission. And I kind of had given up on the idea. And when this German freerider, Gerhard Zerner, contacted me and said, hey, do you want to do it with me? I said, yeah, why not? And then I invited Danny along. And then along with that came Freeride Entertainment sent a film crew, because they said they were working on a film, which they're still working on. It's kind of the history of freeride film. And they wanted to do my interviews actually on the mountain in a real expedition. And so they came along, and out of that, and since they were already there, they filmed the whole trip, and we made a film that's on my YouTube channel. But yeah, I think that was probably the highlight of all my adventures. I don't think, to me, Kilimanjaro is the Everest for mountain bikers, you know, because I know people have been higher than Kilimanjaro, but it's usually they carry the bike up and down. It's not rideable, you know, once you get over, you know, and Kili is almost 6,000 meters. So to me, and that mountain is like 99% rideable or so, you know, at least for us it was.
Yeah.
Most people who went before us, they would carry the bikes up and down, at least on summit day.
Not Hans Ray and Danny MacAskill. It's a kind of a different story with you guys.
No, and we had to get off a few times. We didn't ride everything, but we reckon we rode 99% at least.
Yeah,
or more. So
that's so cool. You and Danny MacAskill, you know, riding together, two legends of mountain bike, and with trials, you know, strong backgrounds, and seeing what you're capable of riding. You know, that's that's quite the story. So I love it. Yeah, and
Danny's famous words were he thought if Hans can do it, I can do it too. And then like he got sick, and he was like, "Damn, that old geezer." But Danny grew up on my videos, and I think we known each other from the very beginning. Even from I was one of the first guys to share his videos when his first video came out.
Yeah,
somebody had sent it to me, and it was nice to see the respect Danny has for my riding. You know, he grew up on my videos, and having to get to know him over the years and doing projects with him is pretty cool. And I mean, the guy is amazing. What he's done, his writing and his creativity is really something I would have never dreamt of, you know. So
yeah, totally. Yeah, he's killing it, and such a nice guy that you're happy for him because he's a good guy and he's killing it, and he is very creative and whatnot. You know, you've inspired a lot of riders. You know, like there's Fabio Vidmer who is killing it out there right now as well, and not just those guys, but like mountain bikers all around the world. So, you know, you've played a part in bringing the whole sport to so many eyeballs that it's amazing, and stoked me and Richie and Wade and everybody. So, you know, like you're like a mountain bike god.
Thank you.
And you're a buddy. Like we've become friends, and it's just cool. And you get used to people, you know, and you know them, and like, oh yeah, that's my buddy, blah blah blah. But then you're like, I just read your CV here, and all the things you've done in this career is insane. So it's much respect. Hans, you know what? Congratulations to an amazing career. Long may it continue. You know, like I look to you as still pioneering the way, and you know, I'm trying to stay in the game as well, and as many of us are, and why wouldn't you when you've got a passion for it? But you've been a role model for many of us, and much respect and love to you. And I know that you're doing some projects now where you're doing like film shoots on the edge of cities, and you've invited me to do one in the future when the world gets a little bit healthier.
Adventures.
Yeah, and I look forward to that. And good luck to your charity for life and whatnot. And thanks for coming on the show with me and sharing some of your experiences and your life story.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for the kind words. And I guess, you know, somebody has to pioneer the 50 plus category, so why not me?
Yeah.
So I'll keep going at it, and we will see what the next decade in cycling will bring us. Happy trails for sure.
Yeah, totally. I think you and I are the oldest and the second oldest pro mountain bikers still out there, still giving her. And then Richie Schley, I think, is right after us. But we're still in the game, buddy. Still charging.
And don't forget Tinker.
Oh yeah, Tinker. Is he still making it a career? I guess so, eh?
I think he cannot stop racing. I think he still does these gnarly endurance races. You know, I mean, it's less high profile stuff, but I think he still has sponsorship from Cannondale, and he's still out there and training and riding, and
wow, so amazing longevity. Well, hats off to all the old guy power, and keep leading the charge, buddy. Thanks for coming on the show, and we'll talk to you later, brother.
Hasta la vista.
Right on. Hans Ray, no way, Hans Ray. Thanks, buddy.